There we go.
There it is.
All right. We have a full house tonight. Welcome. Let's go ahead. We've got a lot on our agenda, so let's get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and I've asked Commissioner Hunt to give us a thought or legislative prayer, so I will turn the time over to him.
Yeah, we have a full meeting tonight, so I thought I'd just give a quick prayer, and so we can move forward with that. So, our dear Heavenly Father, we are so very grateful for this beautiful day that we've had today, and for the opportunity we have to be gathered together this evening to discuss these items on the agenda tonight for Centerville City. Please bless us that we can move forward and make actions and decisions that will best benefit the community and those around us. Please bless that we can have our minds open and enlightened and work together. We are grateful for all that we have and pray for these things. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Moving to our first item on the agenda, we're being asked to consider the DeVore property rezone from agricultural low to residential low, and I will turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Heyman and the Commission. The first item is, as you said, the rezoning of the DeVore property. This as, let's see. There are 5 parcels up for rezone, and they include this large property that connects Main Street to the frontage road, as well as 4 smaller parcels in between. The applicant is Russell Wilson. He's representing Symphony Homes for this rezone. So staff reviewed rezones in the past, things that came up, but there are 4 items that the Planning Commission needs to review when accepting a rezone. And in the general plan, section 12-480-5, which talks about the Northwest neighborhood, which is, these properties are part of that neighborhood, there are a few main goals to take into consideration. The first is to ensure compatible land use and transitions. And let's see, which one is, do you have the zoning map up? Oh. So all of these 5 parcels are currently agricultural low, but they are in a zone of transition. To the west and south of the properties is the Lexington subdivision, which is all residential low. And then it connects to other agricultural low, the public facilities medium, and then across Main Street is some more residential low. So there would be a transition between zones, but since they are all residential low versus agricultural low, that's the same density and same intensity. So there wouldn't be need for any buffering. 2 other goals to take into consideration is to preserve semi-rural areas for current landowners and preserve the viability of development for the future. In talking to Corey this morning, he helped me understand the preserving current owners' use, semi-rural use, and that is, instead of a broad sweeping rezone of the whole neighborhood, this is just these lots. It's not sweeping, just the lots that are up for rezone, instead of mandating that all the semi-rural areas need to be rezoned. So staff recommends this rezone based on that it wouldn't be too different for the area. The majority of land in Centerville is residential low, and so it would be similar to the rest of Centerville. Do you have any questions regarding any of the rest of the staff report or anything else?
Chair Heyman, if I can just weigh one issue, just so you get a little bit of the historic background. On the Neighborhood 4 plan, it talks about preserving agricultural low for current owners. What that means is during 2003, when the city did a whole citywide rezone, it honored the commitment of that neighborhood to maintain for the current owners in play to keep the agricultural low zoning. It would not be implemented on a broad city sweep through a mass rezone. The expectation is that in that neighborhood, it would grow over time in future development and transition from agricultural low to residential low as properties came in to be rezoned. So instead of just going into the area and saying it's all residential low, they just honored to keep the agriculture, and in the future, on a puzzle piece basis, it would rezone to the RL. And so that's what it means.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff?
Quick question on that, Corey. Were there any properties that the city initiated a rezone for at that time?
Further in the other neighborhoods, yes.
So this neighborhood, the city didn't initiate any rezones, but in other neighborhoods, the city.
Well, they did initiate rezones in the sense of relabeling the zoning districts and setting different densities associated with those districts. So the agricultural low preserved the original minimum lot size, which was half acre. The old R110 and the R18s disappeared and transitioned to RL. And RL is now gross density instead of a minimum lot size. So typically R110 was a 10,000 square foot lot. R18 was an 8,000 square foot lot. Those zones were taken away in 2003 and transitioned to the RL. The RL does not have a minimum lot size anymore. It has an average density of no more than 4 units per acre. And that's a gross density. So the net would be a little bit less because you install roads as a part of that. So that's closer to the R110 when you net out than the quarter acre lot. So they just went, so there was some rezonings, but they preserved and honored that the current property owners in this neighborhood that were agricultural before would be maintained as agricultural until they transition through subsequent rezones.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? If not, we'll invite the applicant to step forward and speak to this matter. Either one. If you'll just introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, I'm Russ Wilson. I'm with Symphony Homes. We're local. We're at 111 South Frontage Road here. And we're glad to be here. We appreciate you reviewing our application. We're requesting this rezone. Symphony Homes owns approximately 6.79 acres, right in between, right in the middle, at the end of 400 West. And then we're also asking for a rezone of approximately 9.96 acres owned by the DeVore family. Symphony Homes developed the Lexington Park neighborhood, which is just south of here, more southwest of this property, almost 18 years ago. And as part of that development, there were some residual parcels of land left over to be developed at a future time when a better lot configuration and a better layout could be assembled. In anticipation of future development, Symphony worked with the city at the time during the approval process for Lexington Park to provide for a future road connection to 725 West, which exists, and a connection to extend 400 West, which is it's a 60-foot public right-of-way, and it's planned as part of the city's master plan to go through, to continue through. Over the past couple months, we've been working with the DeVore family to aggregate our properties together and put them together to achieve a better layout, a better design, a better lot configuration than if we approach this development with just single parcels. The lot sizes west of 400 West would be compatible with the existing lots in the Lexington Park neighborhood, and the lots on the east side of this project would be larger and more consistent with lots that are closer to Main Street. We believe the rezone would be consistent with the goals and objectives of the city's general plan. Future homes in this neighborhood, we would anticipate homes to range in price from 500,000 up to $1 million. The 500,000 range would be more on the western side of the property, and then as you move up the hill, we'll probably see homes upwards of $1 million. Appreciate your consideration of our application. Do you have any questions for me?
So when you say that there are going to be lots on the differences in lot sizes on the east and the west sides, can you give me just a general sense as to what you're thinking in terms of east and west size-wise?
Yeah, so more west of 400 west would be homes in the quarter-acre range, maybe a little bit less than that. And then as you work up the hill, we would put a road right in the center of that larger piece of property, and you'll see lots in the third acres range.
And do you guys have any idea as to how many lots that you plan on putting in this development
We're
total?
looking at approximately 60.
Okay.
Is your anticipation then, help me do the math then, 60 lots in here, is that going to be similar to, I guess you kind of said on the west side it'll be similar to Lexington, east side will be maybe a little bit bigger lot size than that. Any thoughts or plans of any type of PDO for this, or just a regular subdivision?
We've thought about that, and our application we'd like, of course, like to streamline, so we thought we would apply for the RL zone because it is compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? No? Right, thank you very much. This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll take the opportunity to invite any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter to step forward. Anyone? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing.
Well, give him a second.
there it goes.
Anybody? I don't know who, like, there's a ton of people here, so I'm assuming that people are here for something. I just don't know which matter. Is it this one? If it's this one. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm not going to close the public hearing. If you'll just state your name for the record.
My name is Mila Cutler, and my question is, I want to clarify, he said that you would extend 400 west. How far?
Okay, what we will do is, if anybody has questions, we'll write all the questions down, and then once we get through the public comment process, then we can bring the applicant back up to answer those questions. Anyone else wish to speak to this matter? If you do, you can pick either mic. Just go ahead and step forward and introduce yourself, state your name.
My name is Abe Millett. We live just to the north of this property here on the corner there. Had some questions on the access. When we moved into the lot, the city brought up the concern about entering directly from frontage road. We didn't think it'd be too much of an issue. It turns out it has been an issue. We've had some near misses with pedestrians and cyclists and vehicles. If this is developing, it's only going to aggravate the issue. I want to, I guess, address that safety concern and how we could tap into our property so it wouldn't be entering right in frontage road. We'd somehow need to tap into their property to avoid what we're dealing with right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Ralph Cutler. Just want to make sure that the drainage issues get addressed much better than they have been on the other development in the northwest corner of Centerville. So it needs to be engineered. It was not engineered before. Water does not run uphill without a pump.
My name is Cindy Garlick. I actually border the subdivision that Ralph Cutler just talked about, and the drainage issue there is deplorable. When that subdivision was initially put in, we were told everybody was responsible for their own drainage, We assumed that that was going to be the case, and now we, as a homeowner, are responsible not only for our drainage, but for that entire subdivision's drainage. We have taken myriad of videos and pictures of water as it floods under the fence from that subdivision and runs down our property line, and we ultimately pump that water down to the frontage road in order for it to be drained properly. So along with Ralph, I do agree that drainage issues have to be resolved long before it becomes an issue, and ensure that other property owners in the area are not going to become responsible for the drainage of a new subdivision.
Thank you.
Lisa Fowers, and I'm on the end of 400 West, facing west as well, but we have water issues as well, so I just want to make sure that they are addressed because it does run down and we would be towards the bottom there, but we have water year-round, and we spend a lot on our property to put in an extra drainage system. I think we have a French drain and a curtain drain. But there's still a lot of water, and there's going to be more water issues. So, yeah, I just want to make sure that that's addressed as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jen Bader. I was just wondering if there has been impact reports done or going to be done, or are they necessary?
Okay. Anyone else? I don't want to cut anyone off. Going once, going twice. There we go. Thanks.
I'm Allison Garlick, and the question that I have, I know that in the past when rezonings have come up in the city planning and things, plans have been submitted for different subdivisions and then have been changed dramatically from what the original plan was. So I just want to ask the question as to whether or not this is going to be a solid plan for this subdivision, or if it's going to be like some of the others and have it dramatically change to what housing and lot sizes are going to be placed into this subdivision.
Thank you.
So my name's Ben Silos. I live in Lexington Park on 4th West. Two concerns that I have. One is going to be traffic flow, with this being an elementary school that sits right there, and this being a long time dead end. We still get a lot of traffic that comes flying down that road. Anytime there's any problem with the freeway, Main Street, or frontage road, where they'll come down that road very quickly, and we get quite a bit of traffic with a lot of kids. So I'm concerned what the traffic flow will look like with this new subdivision, whether everything is going to be funneled through 4th West, or if it's going to be coming off of Main Street and frontage. In addition to that, I'm curious about the construction traffic that's coming through that neighborhood, as we're constructing 60 homes in that area, and the duration of time that that's going to have on impacting the neighborhood. And then finally, to add to the drainage issues, I have significant concerns with Symphony in regards to the drainage and handling the drainage correctly. Being in Lexington Park, there was a lot of promises that were made. There was a lot of drainage concerns that were brought up. There was a lot of discussion about how that was going to be handled. After homes were being built and after lots were sold, a lot of those agreements were backed out of and changed. So I have very serious concerns, as everybody's mentioned, with the drainage issues, and Symphony being the one that's coming into this just simply because of our experience with them backing out of commitments on handling that in the past.
Thank you.
I'm Kelly Lowe. My house backs the field, the west side of Lexington Park, which is going to be the smaller lot sizes. My question is also with the water table and the drainage, backing that field, I can look out my window at any given time, especially the spring, and see basically ponds and lakes out there, and frogs that live out there, birds. So my question is with the water table basically being like ground level, also has it been, like, is it suitable for development as well as is it wetlands? Like, do these animals need to be preserved?
Chris Cutler. Our ground is just to the north of that property. This is a silly question, but are there any plans to take care of the deer herd that live down there? Thank you.
My name is Troy Pechtel, and I live just south of there on Main Street, and I just want to be on the record as being opposed to changing the zoning, period. I think it needs to be, you have 10 acres, you have 10 houses, or what you said they could be half-acre lots. I just want to go on the record as being opposed.
Thank you.
Hello, Cole Smith. I'm also on 400 West, right near where the road dead ends. I also echo the issues on the drainage. Some of us have put in significant expense, having to put in sump pumps, et cetera, to keep up with the drainage because of the unkept promises from Symphony when the development was made. I'd further like to ask, as also a parent who's a volunteer on the Reading Elementary Parent Advisory Council, that consideration be made for a crossing guard to be put in at 2025 North and 400 West as well, or to consider putting in the blinking lights on top of the four-way stop signs, similar to what was done on Jennings Lane and 400 West. It is needed, it's a problem now, and if 60 homes are going to be added in, significant safety concerns, I'd like to make note of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Holyoke, and I live on 2025 North. And aside from what everyone else has brought up, one of my biggest concerns is a child was hit in front of my home, and the traffic is outrageous, absolutely outrageous. And if the proposed 60 homes are going to be brought in, and then the other development property that's happening, it's only going to get worse, because 2025 North is a main road and it's really seriously out of control. And so many homes that live on that road are families that are an average of 6 or more, with most of the kids still being in middle school and elementary school. And that's a huge concern of mine. And I hope the developers really think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right, I'll go ahead. Thank you very much. I'll close the public hearing. We'll invite the applicant to step back. Sounds like we had some questions. Before you do that, a couple of questions for you, Corey.
Sure.
Some of these I think are going to be better for the applicant to answer.
Well, yeah, I think we can answer some that we have information on, and then you can give the petitioner the last word. I wouldn't want to step on their rights to have the last debated effort.
I agree. I thought that there were a couple of these that we could respond to. There were some concerns that have been raised that I think we're definitely going to need to consider, although at this point we're only looking at whether we're rezoning. We're not looking at the actual development of the property, although I think that there were some really great comments made, so that if and when we get to that phase, that we need to consider that Do you know, Corey, whether this area, a question was asked, is this part of a protected wetland?
Sure, I'll answer that question if I can just step back just a little bit on the process and how that would play into it.
Sure.
If you don't mind, it'll answer probably several questions.
Please do.
The first one is the matter before you is a rezone, so we're not considering the design of the development. That doesn't mean that you can't hear the information and raise some concerns about it, but there's no definitive answers to the engineering, the success of that engineering, the design of the engineering, how much water is being generated. This is simply just the rezone. And the question becomes usually during a rezone, is there adequate facilities to serve the development? And the answer to that is yes, there's adequate facilities to serve the development. Now the question becomes later, the next step in the process would be the subdivision process. And the subdivision process, just by way of understanding, involves this body as a recommending. You'll go through the preliminary, conceptual and the preliminary, prepare the development from a recommendation as a land use, but it will also kick up to the city council. And so an example would be, is an important part, is it's an inability for staff or you to answer the issue of the crossing guard. A valid one, but there's no way we can answer that. But that is certainly something the city council can answer. They can answer prior to this development by going to the city council and raising that concern. They can also raise it during the development process when we talk about where the roads are connecting and how they're connecting and what will that add and where's the appropriate place to have safe routes to school and so forth. So that is more of a development process than the rezone, and we wouldn't be able to provide such intricate answers, which leads back to the issue of drainage in the water. This whole area has a significant high water table. And so land drains have been installed. I know there's issues with the Woods Park. The engineer has worked with the city council and made a report to the council. So I'd refer anybody that's concerned about Woods Park. Answers were provided to the city council and what's happening there, and certainly can go to the city recorder and request the report that was given from the city engineer regarding Woods Park. But the issue of Woods Park is for the most part, other than some sprinklers and a broken line, Woods Park is handling its own drainage, but it interrupts drainage coming from the east. And that's been the significant issue of where the pooling and so forth. I'm not the engineer, but this is from Main Street to Frontage Road, so it's going to be a better piece in its configuration from my perspective to handle the drainage, because we will be handling it from Main Street all the way down through the development towards the frontage road where the water eventually have to disperse. So I think there's a greater success rate in the engineering of the drainage. That leads to back to your question of the wetlands. The wetlands, if they are jurisdictional wetlands, they have to deal with the Army Corps, but also remember that properties are wet when canals are biomassed and the water flows over. In our preliminary discussions at the Development Review Committee, the Public Works Director indicates that the canals are often plugged, and that's the water source spilling onto the lower end of the property. So if they handle the canal issue, whatever that's piping or diverting water to some other pipe, I don't know, I'm not the engineer, but for preliminary answer is it should dry up the land. That doesn't mean that the water table is still not present. And so the question of, are there impact studies? Well, the issue for soils, yes. Soils report are automatic as part of any land development. They will go in and tap where that water table is, what's the quality of those soils, is there anything that needs to be handled to prepare those soils. The developer probably can tell you more about the property than I can. Likely you're going to see half basements and something that more on the southern end than you will, or on the western end than you will the eastern end, because that's where the water is coming out and coming close to the surface. So certainly there's some design issues with basements and fill and compaction, and all of the soil studies reports will be taking care of that. The other answer to the traffic, yeah, that's always an issue of subdivisions, because we got to deliver the traffic not only for the subdivision but for the folks. So in the area, so if you look at 2150, where Mr. Cutler owns some land, That's the road planning to go all the way to the frontage road. That's on the master plan. Now, how it's configured, yet to be debated because that area is yet to be developed. But 2150 is master plan to hit the frontage road. 400 West is master plan to go all the way to Lund Lane in the future. So the answer to where 400 West would go, to the north end of the DeVore property, which is the little stem piece. I can't, left-handed here. This is a little stem, I think it's 90 feet wide, something of that nature. It'll go to that stem and stop and terminate. You're likely going to see a configuration of a road heading up to Main Street, because that's the way to enter that east side. If you look down on the west side, you have the 400 West, you have a stub road from the Lexington Park, is that right? So Lexington Park subdivision. And whether it goes to the frontage road or doesn't go to the frontage road would be something probably still yet in the debate. Our subdivision ordinance requires connections to local roads, so those will be some of the obvious connections, but we'll also be looking at connections to the arterial and collectors. And we'll be seeing what the developer in the future is planning to do, and then what we go through the subdivision process and vet out what's the final layout design and its conceptual and preliminary approvals, which would be a great pace for the public. If it's rezoned, because we don't know, it's got to go up to the city council, but it's for the sake of argument tonight, it's rezoned. There's a further step of conceptual where the developer will disclose their preliminary layout, where the staff will go through the ordinances, the public will be invited in the public hearings to comment on those layouts, and then it'll go to the preliminary, back to this body, then to the final, for this final check of this body, and the final going to the city council, which will also be a public hearing at the council level. So some of these development questions are not as concrete to answer tonight because we're just talking about a rezone. They are more geared towards actual development and actual layout. And so the question tonight and for the council on this petition is this property in a place that should be rezoned? Don't think it covered everyone, but a lot of them.
I think I was checking them off on my list. I think that you covered quite a few of those.
Oh, the deer.
The deer.
Don't know the position of the deer, positive or negative, like displacing the deer, like we want to relocate them in a positive manner. That's the current policy of the city. We have an urban deer ordinance, and DWR has given 100 permits from starting in, was it October? Starting in October through a certain early spring, that the matter of urban deer to terminate is available on and the police department is managing those complaints and getting rid of the deer. If you're looking at a relocation scenario, talk to your council. They have not done a relocation effort. It's been unsuccessful in the past, so we have a termination agreement with DWR. Maybe that's covered them all now.
Pretty darn close. Thank you very much, Corey. Okay, and now I will invite the applicant, Mr. Wilson, to come back. We may have some additional questions for you. First, I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to any of the comments that you heard or any of the questions that, to the extent that you want to provide additional or different information than what Corey has provided.
No, I think Corey covered it pretty well. We are in the process of engineering. We've hired a soils engineer to do some soils testing, and there is quite a bit of engineering that needs to go into drainage, drainage studies and drainage plans, and we're definitely going to take that into account. We are aware that especially the western half of the property is more wet. It does have a higher water table, and we knew that from the beginning, and we're not going to jeopardize any basement, so we will be building, we will most likely be raising roads and building above that, so we're not putting any basements or homes in jeopardy. It does get quite a bit drier up the hill as you go, but still we'll be installing surface drains and subsurface drains as well to handle any of that water.
Great, thank you. So I think Corey hit most of the questions. How far 400 West was going to extend, the questions about the impact reports.
On that question, a stormwater impact analysis is required, is it not, for the project? Meaning there'll have to be someone that does a runoff calculation and how they're discharging that and all that stuff?
Yeah, there's an impact fee and a design program for storm drainage the city's initiated, and they will have to provide not only stormwater management, but they will have to pay the impact fee to help with the infrastructure to be constructed.
Yeah, and prepare a soils report.
Soils report is a little bit different. They'll do the drainage different. The soils report will address the conditions of the soil and the water and the feasibility of basements and so forth. Then the stormwater management plan will be a part of the subdivision process. I think the question that I missed come to mind is the construction.
Timing, yeah.
Yeah, the timing, I don't know their phasing and how long they're going to attrition the development. There is a requirement for stormwater management during construction, but I think the question was more oriented towards workers coming back and forth, and unfortunately, we don't have a requirement to eliminate the traffic, but we do have requirements for noise and hours of operation.
And as far as duration for the construction, that could largely be up to the developer, how long it takes. It could be as quick as...
Yeah, I
6 months,
assume
as
that
long
they'll come to us with the future plan of that property. I suspect it may be in a phased development. Maybe they want to disclose that because I don't know that, whether it's just one big fell swoop and attrition the lots after that. Because that's what they can do, build the whole infrastructure to support all the lots, and then the lots just go as the market sells. But the amount of infrastructure that may be required may generate a multiple phase subdivision process, which then there would be multiple hearings through each phase.
Yeah, and Mr. Wilson, I know that you're only here to speak to the rezone, so unfortunately for you, we have some additional questions that are maybe a little beyond the scope of that, but since some people have raised some concerns and we have you here, it's probably a good opportunity to ask you the question. I don't know if you know the answer to this yet, because we are not at the subdivision stage. We're not at conceptual or preliminary or final site plan, obviously. But do you have some general understanding as to what the construction process is going to look like, how it's going to look, how long?
We haven't made the final determination, but I would suspect we're going to do this all in one shot. We've got two different product types between the smaller lots on the west side and then the slightly larger lots on the east side. So we will have two different product offerings, which would wean us to tend toward just doing the whole thing at once.
Okay.
We're assuming we're going to be making a connection to Main Street, and we're anticipating doing a traffic study as part of that. UDOT is most likely going to require a traffic study, so we're planning on doing that.
There was some concerns raised with regard to the frontage road. Somebody has a piece of property that's abutting the frontage road and was concerned that it's going to aggravate. Have you considered how you're going to try to ameliorate some of the effects of the surrounding property with regard to that increased traffic, and particularly as it pertains to the frontage road?
We haven't looked really hard at that yet, so
okay.
I can't answer that at this point.
No, I recognize I'm asking you questions that are more than what it is that you guys are out here asking. So we'll if we approve this rezone and you submit an application, then we can get to that.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions for staff?
Yeah, there was, sorry.
Go ahead.
There was one other question that as I was checking through them that may not have been addressed. So concerns about backing out of agreements. Corey, can you describe our bonding process that we have? So if a subdivision comes in and they have to put in the drainage for the infrastructure, don't we require them to bond for that? And if they don't complete that, then the city has the right to execute the bond and complete those?
Yeah, the comment was the bait and switch, for lack of better terms, cliche. They propose one thing and it comes in different. That's not really the scenario sitting here, because they're asking for the rezone, and we know that a rezone in this case, starting from raw land, will be, for lack of better terms, the standard cookie cutter subdivision. Roads put in, lot lines drawn. We know the ultimate intensity, density, in the sense of if it goes to RL, you can't have more than 4 units per acre gross. So that's going to lead you to about 60 lots. And so there's not an opportunity at this point, given this application, to change that. It's just going to be what the subdivision ordinance allows at the maximum number of lots that's allowed to be. And then the infrastructure, the support improvements are all for the subdivision as a whole are bonded. Now, there's intricacies of the bond. They can actually start construction, which we call play in their own sandbox. But when they're ready to tie into the public infrastructure, there's some bonding. And they bond for those improvements once they want to tie into the public infrastructure. And they have 18 months to install them at that point, and before we can call on the bond to complete it. And then afterwards, they have a 1-year warranty. So I'm not sure the genesis of the concern, but in this particular case, given this application, it's fairly straightforward.
I want to address a few of these. As far as the drainage goes, the state has really vamped up their requirements for any type of development. They kind of put a mandate on each city to how they're going to control it, and they oversee that, and they're a lot more, I guess, strict of how drainage is handled in developments. And I grew up in West Bountiful, and I'm totally familiar with drainage issues and being on the west side, and I get that frustration. But I do know that the state's mandated, and they have certain requirements of what needs to be done for drainage. And also, as property is developed, land does dry up a little bit. The groundwater typically does lower a little bit in that area. I don't know if it will. But I think as far as this concept goes, it's quite unique to have that swath of land under one developer that can kind of master plan that and handle all of the drainage at once. Rather than one piece at a time, you're going to have 4 or 5 different possibilities or different developments that could come in, and it's going to be kind of piecemeal together. Whereas this case, you can kind of try and address all of it together and really help mitigate that issue. As far as wetlands goes, the Army Corps is there. If there are wetlands, they have very strict requirements that need to be made for that. The only difficulty that I really see in this development is traffic. That's a lot harder to mitigate. Water is they can put in infrastructure to really help with water, but traffic is a little bit more difficult. Having 3 little girls, having the possibility of more traffic is a concern, and hopefully, and well, that's why we have engineers, a city engineer that can look at those traffic concerns and what mitigation efforts can be done to help either reduce speed or to slow traffic or to redirect it, or I don't know how you do that. You're surrounded by Main Street and the frontage road, which are 2 pretty major thoroughfares. I don't know how you're going to reduce speed in those areas. But I guess that's my comment on that. That's kind of my only possible hiccup on that is traffic.
Kevin?
Yes, thank you. Corey, could we play some hypotheticals here, kind of run some hypotheticals for a second? So obviously the question before us is a rezone, agricultural low to residential low. Let's pretend for a minute that this were developed under agricultural low. It would be developed with a lower density.
Yeah, so it'd be half-acre minimum lots.
Right.
So
you'd get fewer units in here, I guess you'd say.
Yes.
However, correct me if I'm wrong, but that wouldn't necessarily change the drainage, because you're still going to have the same kind of roads coming through here. You're going to have the same curb and gutter. You're going to have the same
Yeah, you increase a little bit your yard space to allow the natural drainage to sheet flow and seep into the soil, I would say. But I'm not sure that, I mean, you're still looking at quarter acre lots. You'll get a little bit more hard surface, but our drainage impact fees all centered around the quarter acre lots to begin with. All of our infrastructure's anticipating 4 units per acre. And so you would get a little bit more natural, but you're correct. The houses are going to generate, and then it has to flow out. The driveways will, the road system will. Those are all probably similar improvements. You just have a larger lot area, so that reduces the number of units.
Yeah.
And maybe adds a small percentage of infiltration into the soil.
Okay.
But I'm not the engineer on the commission. There is an engineer on the commission, so they can contest that if they want.
You're spot on.
Any other questions for staff? Any discussion or debate? Or I should say further discussion or debate.
Yeah, I think a lot of the questions that were brought up are really good ones. It's because this is a multi-stage process, it's hard. There are legitimate concerns that have been brought up, and I think that they can be considered when we look at a rezone, because I think that does impact the decision to rezone. But a lot of those puzzles will be answered. It was interesting to hear 2 different issues on traffic. One that talked about how an access to the frontage road presents safety issues for like turning out or walkers. But the other one, another traffic comment was that we have a ton of traffic coming down 2025. So basic planning says if you want to reduce traffic on one road, you add alternative routes. So you could actually relieve traffic by adding another cut onto the frontage road. But there's other things that there's the negative impact of, another cut on a fast road. So, I am confident those things will be fleshed out according to the established laws that we have through the ordinance process. Corey, I would only encourage you if and when this moves forward to just make sure there's a magnifying glass in Kevin's hand when he goes to look at the drainage and traffic, so that nothing doesn't, so there isn't anything that sweeps under the rug. But I'm generally inclined to approve this request. I feel like it's consistent with the general plan, and it definitely helps to address the never-ending issue of affordable housing in the state. Slightly, Kevin.
Look, let me comment real quick on a couple of thoughts with this. First of all, this is a multi-stage process, and I'm happy that this is a multi-stage process. I really enjoy the comments that we got today. I think that's part of the reason why you saw that certainly when staff gave their presentation, we were quiet, listening. I know I wanted to hear what the public had to say with it. I'm happy that we did that. I'm really hopeful that the applicant will take these comments that were given by the public, by the Plan Commission as well, but especially the public, and consider those in the development, the future next steps that we're going to take along this process. We've seen that work as a Planning Commission where developers have taken feedback from the public and the commission as well, changed the plans a little bit, or made something that seems to work better for what people are doing, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that work in this case as well. So I would encourage as well the public to continue to come out to these meetings for this particular project. Give us your thoughts. Tell us what you're seeing, and let's continue that kind of collaborative process along the way. All that being said, I do feel like I'm inclined to support a rezone in this case. This is different than some of the other proposals that we've seen in this area in the past. This does not create any zoning islands like we've had in the past, really. And it's a logical kind of extension of what is already the case in the city as far as extending our residential low zones a little bit further north. And we can do this in an organized fashion instead of potentially piecemealing it along. If this were another Woods Park type of a development, I would not be in favor of something like that. I feel like that was I'll be honest with you, that was a mistake. I wasn't on the Planning Commission at the time, and I'm glad I wasn't because I wouldn't want to put my name on that one. But I feel like we can learn some lessons from that, having seen what that has developed into. And so this is one way that I think we can say, look, this is going to be better. The whole idea of developing from Main Street all the way to the frontage road in one shot helps to mitigate some of those issues that were created by Woods Park, for example. So that's a long, rambling answer, some thoughts that I've had, and thank you.
Kevin, I appreciate those thoughts, and I would echo them to the applicant, that the applicant take those concerns that have been shared here this evening into consideration, and maybe view that as a partnership going forward with the area residents. As this is a multi-phase, multifaceted process. And as you've all come and taken time out of your schedules this evening to come and address these issues and speak out on these matters, as this process goes forward into the subdivision phase, there will be other hearings, and there will be other opportunities to come forward and weigh in on these issues that go deeper into where the roads are and how it's laid out and who's doing what, and looking more closely at the school and where the kids are walking and how they might be affected by this and where the crossing guards should go. And those are all very important things to consider, but they're not really something that we would consider tonight. And I think it's important to also remember that who the applicant is really immaterial to our decision here tonight. As we look at what in the municipal code, in our zoning code, Centerville City, there's really just a few criteria that we are considering as to whether or not to support this. And I'm looking at the zoning code in section 12-21-080, paren E. We're looking at whether the proposed zoning code or zoning map amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the general plan. I think that we agree that it does. We're looking at whether the proposed zoning map amendment is harmonious with the overall character of existing development in the vicinity of the subject property. I think we agree that it does. And I think from the comments that we've heard here tonight, I haven't heard anything to suggest otherwise. If we look at Lexington Park below it, I think that what is described as the future development, what it would be, I think that it's consistent with that. And the extent to which the proposed zoning map amendment may adversely affect adjacent property. Corey, I appreciate the comments that you made that address those and how those will be taken care of along the way. So I think that I too am inclined to vote in favor of the zoning change.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or discussion? I would encourage everyone to stick around for our discussion later tonight on affordable housing. I'm not sure, Logan, that $500,000 to $1 million homes really address the affordable housing problem that we have here, but nevertheless, I'm in favor of this for all of the reasons that my fellow commissioners have articulated. So unless there's any further discussion or debate on this one, the chair will entertain a motion.
Chair, I hereby make a motion that we, for the Planning Commission to accept the zone map amendment for the properties located at 2125 North Main Street from AL to RL, or agricultural low to residential low, and to recommend approval of the City Council with the suggested reasons for the action 1 through 3 in the staff report. Amen.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate?
Yes, it's basic supply and demand. So I understand that 500,000 is not affordable itself, but as you increase supply generally.
I'm harassing you, Logan.
There's a trickle-down effect, right?
No.
I am giving you a hard time because that is what I do. Okay. Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
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 So just to explain to those who are present, what that means now is that we've made a recommendation to the city council that they approve this rezone, but this will now go before the city council, and they will have the opportunity to determine whether to take our recommendation or to do something different. So they will have a copy of our minutes that will be presented to the city council, and you're welcome to also speak to the city council. And has been indicated, assuming that this goes through, if the city council agrees with the rezone, then if Symphony Homes does develop out the property, there will be multiple steps. There's a conceptual plan, there's a preliminary plan, there's a final plan, and we encourage everyone to come and be a part of that process as that development moves forward.
Madam Chair, may I address the audience?
Yes, please.
Look for the city council agenda. It's not been set yet, so there'll be some noticing that'll occur to the city council. You can contact the city recorder and query when it might be on the agenda that she probably doesn't know right now at this moment. We'll send a report up tomorrow to the city council requesting an agenda, but in the next little bit, it should be scheduled on a city council agenda.
Those do get posted on the city's website
They
as
will
well.
be posted on the city's website. If you follow the feed, you'll get a copy of it. You'll also see a change of the notice. We did extra notices. I don't know how much they lasted in any winds or storms, but we tried to put 3, one on frontage, one on Main, one at the end of 400 West. We'll repeat that for the council agenda and put it in there too.
Great. Thank you very much. You're all welcome to stay. We have more fun stuff on the agenda for tonight. I wasn't kidding. We are talking about general plan amendments involving moderate income housing, affordable housing. Very fascinating issue. Very important
That
issue.
does not sound interesting.
It is.
Oh,
I'm very
just kidding.
passionate
I mean,
about
it's
affordable
amazing.
housing. Yes. Okay. I think I'm going to take a brief pause just to allow some folks to move as they're moving.
Probably, yeah.
In all my years in oil.
But now everybody.
I didn't know what everybody was here for. So nobody was like making the shuffle for the hearing, and so I was thinking maybe they're here for something else.
That's fair.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. We've got a lot on our agenda, so we'll move to the second item. We are being asked to consider a conceptual site plan amendment for Dave's Complete Auto, so I will turn the time back over to staff.
Okay, didn't load it. Thank you, Madam Chair. What's come before you is a conceptual site plan. This is moved to the commission's level because it does not qualify for staying within the administrative approval of staff. So you will see this as a conceptual site plan. This is an opportunity for you to discuss with the applicant the ordinance requirements. Staff has also put those identifiers that we found within the report, and we've met with Mr. Bell a couple of times on the matter and hopefully clarified some questions, but he may also have some questions for the commission or at least some feedback. This is existing site for Dave's Complete Auto. What you see, I've been told it was like 93 when the site was developed. I did find like a 96 or 98 application for the expansion onto the back during, because it was built as one. I think they did also an amendment in the historic past. Today, they would like to do another addition. Some of you may recall the addition involves property behind the original Dave's Complete Auto site, which was part of the residential site to the east, and that was rezoned, and part of that rezone was the lot split, changing the boundaries. And so now we've taken the back half roughly of the existing house on Porter. It's been rezoned and then assimilated into the Dave's Complete Auto site. So that's the site of the expansion. They would like to get to approve and then put in their a building and some additional parking and some landscaping. So I think you have 3 general themes that are going on in the staff report. The first one is dealing with expansion of existing development and what role do what was developed into the past, what role does that play in the expansion. Then you have the actual expansion under the current conditions of the code to look at. And then the third one is the request of the applicant. They would like to modify the number of required stalls associated with this specific business, given what they think their operation is, and you'll see a request for a parking modification. Just for a brief summary, I'll let you go to the report and ask questions. As to existing development, we have 2 parameters that are raised in the report. The first one is we don't have a problem with the use, so we don't have any nonconformities associated with the use. We do have a nonconformity associated with the building. The current building is about 3.5 or so by guesstimate from the plans from the property line. That was fine in the past, at least apparently, it's built that way. The new addition follows that wall line. The current zone requires now 8 feet on a side setback. And so that raises the element of the expansion. What, does it move to the 8 feet? We've had discussions with Mr. Bell about that issue. I see there's 2 options. One is to move it to the 8 feet. That's a duh from an ordinance standpoint, but maybe not a duh from a operational standpoint. The other option is on non-conforming structures, the entity that can allow an increase of the degree of nonconformity. So this increases that degree. The Board of Adjustment can allow an enlargement, an expansion to the degree of nonconformity, and there's a few findings that they have to make. So I see to resolve that nonconforming issue is one, go to the 8 feet or go to the Board of Adjustment. I can't guarantee the Board of Adjustment will do it, but I know the criteria. It's not a very high threshold of criteria. So I think there's an argument to be made. Whether they see it that way is a different element. It's 5 members of the community appointed to look at that. So there's a chance of success there. Ultimately, if they were unsuccessful there, the 8-foot now comes into play. So that's a feedback for the final site plan. Maybe go to the Board of Adjustment, see what they have to say, or whatever they want to decide the method to resolve that. The other is called an other nonconformity. Other nonconformities involve parking, landscaping, fence heights, and all of those kind of elements. They're not with the use, they're not with the structure, they're really the issues of the site and the layout. We've pointed out some nonconformities to landscaping in particular. That's probably the major threshold. We now require a certain amount of trees fronting the property, foundation landscaping, and so forth. And I think that needs to be addressed with the final site plan, is bringing that front existing area into compliance with the zoning ordinance, which leads you to, well, why are you saying that, Corey? Because the nonconformity threshold is 30% of the footprint of the building. We're at about 45, I think 44 point something percent. So we're above the 30% threshold, so it causes the other nonconformities to be enacted under the ordinance. And so we raise that matter. To the existing site, it's behind the building, mostly. One, I think, issue that's probably ripe in future ordinance issue is there's a 30-foot buffer from commercial very high to residential development. And so you see the L-shaped configuration of the 30-foot buffer. I drove over there the other day. There's a really, really nice screening wall on this property. I got to hand it to the applicant. That's a beautiful screening wall, and that's substantial. And so adding the buffer, although required, maybe there's some future debate about buffers in relation to what's built. But for today, unless that code changes, it's 30 feet. And that 30 feet in its configuration does substantially impact the parking configuration, so you're starting to see why the request of the parking is coming into play. I mentioned a few other things about straightening out some stalls, and they think they can gain a couple of stalls on that. So that leads us to the issue of the modification. They've provided a study indicating that given their operation, which is mainly servicing vehicles, so we have vehicle repair, and it's all encompassing for everything. Whether you're a tire store, whether you're emissions, whether you're auto body, whether you're foreign car, I think that would get that right, foreign car repair specialty. There's a lot of different categories, and the applicant's making the argument that I mainly repair. The repairs are sometimes very significant, and so the vehicle staying on premise for a substantial amount of time, whether it's a full day, whether it's 2 weeks, depending on engine rebuild versus a few spark plug changes. So there is some coming and going. So they've provided a history of the number of service vehicles through the year. and what would that average out on a daily basis? And their proposal comes up that to adequately serve the development's about 23 stalls. And in the rough layout, you're seeing about 33. I point out some conflicts on 6 stalls, and they're talking about how they resolve that. But you're seeing about a capacity of 30. Our city engineer went to obtain a copy of the parking manual and evaluated their data. And the city engineer has recommended the range of 23, I think it was, to 35. And so I think there's some uniformity to the study that this number 23 is somewhere within the range, but it's on the low end of the range. And so the staff's taking the position on the study is, okay, if we can deal with this range, so we agree, if we can, agree to this range, we would like to see the capacity of the site optimized rather than just go to the 23. And so our calculation would require 80. So I don't think we're approaching anywhere near 80, and the studies are nowhere justifying the 80. You can, if you want to stick to that. The reason I'm making the argument to try to find what the maximum capacity is we're approving it for this use, but who's to say they're planning for, I've been told, beyond Randy's death, of our public works director, beyond Randy's death, that we're okay that way. But I would hate to see us go to 23 if we have capacity for 33 and maximize that capacity. So I didn't recommend the number yet, and I've recommended a slight tabling of the study. If you're amenable to the study elements and don't want to rely on the 80, if you're amenable to those range of 23 to 35, let's go back, reconfigure a few things, pick up a couple stalls, work out the conflict with the bay door, and then are we really 31, 35, 32, 28? I'd just rather see us maximize the capacity of parking. So I'm recommending approval or acceptance of the concept plan, but there's those directives to be resolved with the final.
Corey, when we were talking, and I don't have any major concerns about the parking for this particular use, but you'll recall that when we were looking at the Bridge Church out on the west side, right? That was one where they had received a parking modification. It was great at the time. Nobody had any problems at the time. But then the building changed hands, and then parking became a major issue because it wasn't anywhere close to what it needed to be. The applicant had to go out and get cross parking agreements and whatnot to satisfy it. And so I am concerned that if our code says you need 80 stalls, do you have any concerns? Even on your recommendation going up to 35, is that still going to be acceptable if this use changes in the future? Are we going to have another Bridge Church building problem?
I think you make a good point, and I see that you can tell maybe I have some hints of concern because I'm trying to reach the capacity of the site in its outcome. Now, what's interesting is that the parking modification is to be for the user at hand, and we know that when it changes hands or something happens, things change differently. And I think that's a issue. But I think what's a little bit different on this one than the Bridge community is that they can actually hit the number 80 if you look at their plans. If you include all the service areas inside the buildings, now we don't count inside the buildings as parking stalls, we're assuming uses go on there. But if you count the capacity of vehicles being able to be stored, any service vehicle that they will ever have can be accommodated inside the building, and even in a future use can accommodate. So in some sense, we're not building space that is designed for assembly and can't be used for vehicles in the repair. So somebody taking it over has capacity inside the bay when they run out of parking to put some cars that are needing future service, but they're not working on that day, they would have capacity. Although I hope they're repairing 80 cars at a time. I mean, that would be really cool if they're doing 80 cars at a time. But so there's a little bit different for me because there is some capacity associated with use inside the floor space of the building. And I think that's part of the concern about bumping it to the final plan before you weigh in, is let's find out the capacity with the user and then do the modification on that orientation. so that future buyers and so forth know that they have to come back into the city if they want to adjust it, or if they're repeating the same use, that their capacity is also inside the building, and they're not going to be able to convert that into some type of tenant space for dance recitals, for lack of better terms, because that always needs a lot of parking. So.
Just pick up and drop off.
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit different, but I wouldn't want to say to you, oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Parking modification is that. Are you comfortable with what they're doing?
Lisa, I know that you've raised some concerns with regard to parking modifications in prior, parking modification issues. Do you have any thoughts that are different than Corey's on this one?
Well, my comment has been that we need to really look at our parking overall rather than granting these parking modifications. We've been doing a lot lately. However, it's still in our code, so it's an option for the applicant. I just want to give a different view. I'm concerned about counting. I don't want to give an impression that in the future we will count parking in a building, because typically we do not do that for commercial. So it was an idea that was presented, but I think staff is mixed on whether that is a valid use. Now, in the future, if they say, I'm not doing anything in this building but parking, you know, maybe I would accept that argument, but your use is vehicle repair. It's not parking. So that's why I think as staff, we're saying we would rather support the parking modification than calculating parking within a building, because I don't think our code currently contemplates that.
Thanks. Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, I guess the one thing that kind of hurts that is the aerial view, and you look at Google Earth, there are currently 41 cars parked on the site when you look at it on Google Earth and the aerial view. So it's like, man, you have that many parked there right now, and we're reducing the number of parking stalls, and so it's difficult. Yeah, you look at it there, and it's.
There's no 41 cars. If you're looking at to the east there, that's Les Schwab.
We'll give you the opportunity to talk to this one so that.
So the cars to the east. I thought that was part of Dave's auto.
That's something that we can ask the applicant.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Okay, so I guess that's how I foresaw that, but I mean, and then the reason why we're eliminating so many stalls is because of that 30-foot landscape buffer that they're having to add to that. I mean, I don't know all of the rules and regulations, but to me it would make, and I guess I can't suggest eliminating that to add parking, but I mean, I would rather have cars not being overflowing onto the frontage road and off his property, and I don't know how to address that, but.
To be fair, I count 41 as well, and that's not over there on that east side, on that north side.
That's on to the
Some of those might be
east.
trailers, and some of those might be something else, but there's a lot there.
Sounds like a good question for applicant when they
Let's
step forward.
have the applicant address that.
Any other questions for staff before we invite the applicant up? No? All right. Let's go ahead now and invite the applicant up, and they can address this issue with regard to the cars and some other things. If you could just state your
There's a
name.
fancy pointer there if you really want to use it. High technology.
Fancy pointer.
Hi, I'm Dave Bell. Thanks for your time, coming out and doing your jobs and stuff. I did say east, but I meant to the north. Yeah. And actually, that is who's that used car lot down next to Air Products? That's where he's stashing his cars. York Automotive, that guy right there. That's York Automotive. Mm-hmm. He unloads there. And he's got, I don't know what deal he has, but those are his cars.
You're saying that use.
This
as-
here.
Whoa, I'm going too far. Is all his cars?
You'll all look at them, they all have California license plates on them. This is York's, this is like his staging until he gets them up and ready to go on his lot.
Interesting.
Not to narc him off like I just did, but. I don't think there's 41 cars on here, but yeah, this is actually, these are equipment that I have in a storage unit now because I don't have any room in the building. And this is all pieces of equipment here. That's a tow truck. And then these are some cars. And this is storage here, some storage. But, you know, Lisa made a point. She said, you know, I don't want to get about parking, but, you know, because it's a repair, but when you repair a car, it's going to be parked. I can't work on a car running down the road. It's got to be parked. It's going to be parked inside the building. And so I think it's legitimate that, you know, the people that you had here earlier, you guys, the word is impermeable surface. And all this impermeable surface, you think of Home Depot and Super Target, which I don't think anybody goes to Home Depot more than I do. I go over there for hardware 3 times a day. And I have yet to ever see, even on a Saturday in the spring when that's like their prime day, I'm sure, that lot never even gets close to being up there near where Kohl's is and stuff like that. And, you know, let's talk about Super Target. Maybe 2 weeks of the year, that lot gets close to being full, and we're going to see that here in another month, you know, before Christmas. But I mean, a Super Target does it even get up close to 1/3 of capacity? And so we're overbuilding, and you know, 80 units. So I've provided data. I have 20 years of real data. You can match it up with the sales tax revenue, you know, because those are the numbers. I don't know whether does staff have that, Corey?
And they have a copy of that.
As you'll notice on those numbers through the years, from when did we start? What's the first year of that, Miles? Let me introduce my 30-year-old son. When I put up that building, he was 3 years old. He now runs the place. So when I said jokingly to Randy the other day, I said, we both will be dead. I didn't want to kill off Randy without me being dead. There really is there's no hope. I mean, you know, you want me to bet a lot of money on it? There is no hope on this earth that my son's not going to be there for another 30 years. I got grandkids with him. I got 2 sons. I had 5 sons. 2 of them work in that business. And Miles runs the place. My other son is my machinist. He's sick today. He's not here tonight. But we're not going anywhere. I've been out on that frontage road before. We were doing this the other day in staff. Does anybody, does anybody here know who was there before me? I'll bet you don't. I'll bet. Huh?
I'm just kidding.
Go ahead, give it a shot.
Coats? Yeah, no, I don't know. Was it a gift shop? Sorry.
I was the first guy, but there was one business there on the frontage road before me. And this will show you how old the city and what this city used to be. Like the agricultural, it was Troy-built rototillers, where Renegade, Power Sports, and they're doing rentals there now. That used to be a Troy-built. It was smaller. They didn't have all the addition in the back, but they sold rototillers. And for you that don't know what that is, that's how you get your garden cleaned up. But so I built the building in '93, and what happened to it?
Where's Roman?
Here it is, right there. And just so we kind of familiar, when I bought this ground, it was swampland like the rest of this, and brought a lot of fill dirt. But this is where I raised my family. This house here, this is the pool that I put in. The kids were little, and I'd come over here and go swim with them in the afternoon. I owned this ground. I sold this to, it was the pool, a hot tub place until it got sold. And I still own all this ground back here. I own this old home back here still. But I want to do this addition here. Now, as you look at my car count, my business has changed over the years, and it's important that you understand that. And as you'll see, this is my car count. Now, normally you'll look at that car count and you go, you grab yourself and go, this is not good, I'm getting less customers. Most people go, oh my gosh, I have 2,000 customers a year back in here. And look what I was doing, 1,600,000, 1,300,000. And what I did was, and I appreciate your time, I want you to hear this. I looked at my boat. My boat is my building, I'm a fisherman. That's hence the palm trees. I grew up in Key Largo, Florida. I'm from the Keys. But what I found is that there's so many auto shops, and everybody, it used to be Jiffy Lube only did oil changes. Now they'll do spark plugs, brake jobs, check engine light. I mean, they'll do anything. You know, the Jiffy Lube up there on Pages Lane, or Parish Lane, you know, they'll do anything. And, you know, the Big O Tires, all these places are vying for this. I call it monkey stupid work is really what it is. You know, you can train any monkey to change brake pads and change oil. I mean, it's easy work. And so I thought, how am I going to not only survive but thrive? And I'm really a technician, and I have real mechanics in there. And so what we did, and Corey touched on that, we're a real repair shop. So you look at our average ticket back here, it was $500, $600, $700, $700. Now look how it jumps. It's $1,000, $1,100, $1,600, $1,700 is our average ticket. You know, you call me up for an oil change, I'm gonna tell you I'm big. I'll get you in Christmas of 2020. You know, safety inspection, emissions test. I don't want it. I'm not after that work. We're mechanics. That's our average ticket. If I'm working on your car, basically, you're going to spend $1,700 in there. And what that has done for me is that has extended my net, my casting net. Because of the type of shop I am and the reputation I have, I get people know that I'm the guy to come to if you need seriously difficult work. And that's what Corey talked about. I have cars that will sit in there in the base sometimes for weeks at a time. And if you come in there, you'll see cabs off of big trucks, you know, engines, you know, big jobs coming out of trucks and things like that. And it's difficult work. It's like major jigsaw puzzle. I need the additional space in order to function better. And what will happen, I promise you, is that car count will continue to go down. And this will go up. And this will go up. See, this is just this year. What's the day we put this? So that was October 15th. We will hit $2 million this year. And we will do close to, what are we thinking, 1,100 cars? Is that about where we're going to be? 1,100 cars, break down that by 12 months. There you go. I'm doing 90 cars a month. And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I'm very proud of what me and my sons have accomplished. Miles is, after his mission, and then he went 2 years to school, you know, he came on, you know, right in here. And this is when I realized, this is really when I realized I can't do this anymore. I can't, people aren't going to drive. People are not going to drive past 3 shops to get a brake job. They're not going to do it. I would be out of business, and you don't want that. You don't want that. I don't want that. But I'd be out of business if I hadn't figured this out. To use my talent and the talent that I have in that building to extend my casting net, and we get cars shipped in from all over the place. I mean, you know, if you come in here and see some of the hot rods that we have, and some of these big jobs, crazy jobs, people spend crazy money on engines, and that's what we're doing. So I think if we really do the right thing here, all these people that were in here that were talking about, you know, drainage issues, and, you know, we don't need all this parking. I mean, you know, 80 parking stalls for a building that's going to be 22,000 square feet. I mean, that's like, something's wrong with the code. I just don't think that's right. But I've proven it, the engineers have done the study, and we really feel like, you know, 30, 35. But if you'll bring up, well, you can leave this here. I am absolutely, you know, you talk about a turd, you guys are looking at a turd. I said this in staff, you know, I'm sitting here showing you a turd. If you go ahead and bring up the picture of the site plan. And Brian's my architect. I'm not insulting you, Brian. You got to deal with what you got to deal with. But this is a turd. Let's just call it what it is. Corey was kind enough to say, I spent a lot of money, that's an 8-foot high, and it's got the, looks like river rock kind of, you know, it's on the wall and stuff. I didn't do an ugly old cement wall, but I wanted a really good secure wall because I sometimes get very expensive cars that are stored inside this impound area, you know, this car area, and it's locked every night, and it's lit really well, and it's got cameras back there. And of course, I own this ground back here. Not to confuse everybody, but obviously, I would rather some type of, and I'm probably, Corey telling me, there's no way this, without the law being changed, and then that's a different thing, right? There's no way that's gonna go away, right?
Till it's changed, yeah.
Okay. You might want to think about that, you know, in these situations where you have a buffer that's really, like Corey said, it's 8 foot tall. You can't see over it unless you're, 10 foot tall. And I would like to not have that landscaping on the inside of an impound yard. Everybody agree that's kind of like silly? It's kind of silly. But I sure would like to put the building here. This wall, he said, Corey, I'm now, I think, 3.5 foot from my property line. Give 6 inches or something, let's just call it 3. If the new ordinance for this new addition is 8 foot, that means I've got to move this wall 5 foot. The reason that's like really a problem for me is, last time I checked, they ain't making trucks any smaller. I mean, you guys price truck these dang trucks. They're $120 grand for a truck with a Cummins or a Power Stroke in them, and those engines are $30,000. That's what I get for doing those engines, lifting those cabs off. They're 20, 25, 30 grand, and guys are redoing them because the corrosion protection and everything. You know, trucks. I don't see anybody here really old enough to know what I'm talking about, but you know, if you talk to your dad, remember cars used to rust out if they were 5, 8 years old. Now they'll go 15, 20 years. And so people just repower them is what's going on. And they can spend $25,000, $30,000, put a motor in it with a 100,000 mile warranty, and these contractors and stuff, which is a big part of our business, they just keep driving. And so that's good for the environment, you know, I mean, these are all good things, it's good for my business. But I can't, if you shorten this wall 5 foot, it literally kills me because I need that depth to get trucks in there. I can't shorten a bay 5 foot because that's what we'd be talking about, right? Because it would have to be a total of 8 foot. So we're not talking the wall's got to move 8 foot, it's got to move 5 foot. Am I got that right? Yeah. That just kills my bay space because I'm pretty cramped in there anyway.
I assume that with regard to that, you don't plan on moving the building. I would assume that you plan on going to the Board of Adjustment.
Yes,
on that piece.
I went today. I don't know whether you heard about that. Did you get that?
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, we had I went to a staff meeting yesterday. I got this report Friday, and I panicked. I blew a gasket because I got this report Friday, and then they were kind enough to see me and staff yesterday, and we had a pretty good meeting. I felt like it went pretty well about what I need to do, the hurdles I need to do to get through this. So I have applied for the BOA, the Board of Adjustment, which you said it'd take probably 3 or 4 weeks to get in there and hear from them. And I hope that they consider this. The other thing that, Lisa could talk about this. I had this drawn this way. I've been trying to do this for years, and the same way I was trying to do this back here to rezone this to a residential high, but we ended up going medium, and then we remember how you guys changed the medium code to meet the lower density. Everybody remember that? I was doing backflips in here. At that time, Les Schwab owned 1.5 feet. This is the backyard. This used to be the backyard of my house here. I had a basketball court for the boys, just a nice big yard when they were growing up. And but Les Schwab had 1.5 feet by, I think that's 150 foot long or something like that, jog. And somebody at the city said to me, Dave, you can't put your wall straight there, you don't know the ground. I was like, oh, and maybe it's just my age, the architect, or it was probably Vaughn Hill. That's who that was. Vaughn, he was retired. And so anyway, so I took the time and I got a hold of Les Schwab, told them what I was doing. They wouldn't sell me the ground, but they gave it to me, and they said condition, and I signed a 10-year non-compete. They said, we don't want you selling tires, and if you sell that building to anybody, we don't want them selling tires. I said, I don't, tires are black, they're round, they got grooves in them, I don't care about them, don't want them. It's not my business. So I signed the dang thing, and they gave me the ground. So I've been working on this long, and I thought I had this all ready to go, and that's my story. As far as the landscaping, my architect has assured me that we found out about some of these, like the trees, and I'll plant the trees, I'll do whatever, all these other items. I think really the only thing that's an issue is the parking modification, and we also have who's going to deal with the building, the architectural outside. Is that the plan? Is it? Okay. If I had my way, I would love. I'm a fabricator. I'm a machinist, mechanic, and fabricator. If I had my way, this place would look like a blacksmith shop. I mean, if I had even my sons will tell you, I would love for that place to look like something out of the 1850s or something. I really would like that. I can't do that because I don't have the money for it. But I mean, the inside would be nothing but hammered steel and beams, and it would look like that. But with that being said, I've kept that building. I built that building in 1993, so I've been, 27 years now, almost. I've kept it pretty dang clean. I think my palm trees, they need to be replaced because they look pretty wore out. But what I really would like to do is I think we should keep it the metal, in here. I think Corey suggested that we go with the fluted Brock, and if you could show me the north side wall that would face Les Schwab. Yeah, that one right there. Now, this will be fluted block because that's what this is right here. And we could put some elements in here, like I could do the same thing back here, but do you understand, this back here, Les Schwab is sitting like right here. And unless you pull into Les Schwab's spot where all those cars that we just talked about on the north side, that guy's storing right here, you're never gonna see this. The only guys that are gonna see this are the mechanics working over Les Schwab. I mean, I challenge you, you can't see back here. And I'd just like to keep the building. I mean, look at the front of it.
Mr. Bell, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So I recognize that you don't agree with all of the code provisions that are in effect now, but staff has recommended approval, assuming that you comply with the various items that staff has identified in its report. And I take it from your comments that even though they may not be ideal for your particular layout, that you're prepared to comply with all of the requirements that staff has included in its report with, and I recognize that we have a debate here about the parking, but everything else, is there anything else in this report?
Just
that
the
you couldn't comply
setback,
with?
which I guess is not even, that's something that you don't have to deal
Yep,
with. Is
that's
that
something that you would go to
Okay.
the Board of Adjustment for,
Yeah,
but
the
everything else in there is, you could comply with that?
Yeah, the parking in this architectural design, I guess. Everything else, we've got no problem, right? And
Great.
and the landscaping inside the impound yard, there's nothing you can do about that anyway, because that's code, that's got to happen. And so the only way around that is to change the code, Corey, or to move, or what we've talked about in staff would be to move on some of my ground onto the ground that I own behind it and
Right.
move that wall, which
Is pending a lot of other debate.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for the applicant?
This is a question maybe for both, if that's okay. The materials in the staff report under architectural design, Corey, whoever put the staff report together said staff would prefer the elimination of metal and replace it with more decorative concrete block. Talk to me about the requirement to do that. Is that a design suggestion by staff, or is that a requirement by code?
It's not a requirement by code in the sense of the type of material. All site plans are subject to review of the general plan, so I refer you back to the general plan language, which is trying to improve the appearance of the frontage road from I-15. And so I bring up the block issue because All Seasons Spa was built out of that. I realize we have an existing building. A lot of it's tucked behind, so that's an argument that can be made. But I didn't, there's no standard in the commercial very high because we're out of the parish lane design guidelines. It's just saying, hey, you're in a neighborhood that's trying to improve the appearance of along I-15. Now it's really the call, it's very subjective because there's no ordinance standard of material. So I bring up All Seasons because it's built right next door, and that's the choice that they made acceptable to visual to I-15. And this building has some of that and some of the metal, and the question just becomes, it's tucked in behind, what's its prominence, how do you view it from I-15, and I'm just really letting you weigh the outcome.
Personally, as I imagine seeing it from I-15, it's on the northbound side. You're not going to see it ever. Hopefully, people aren't driving and then hurrying, taking a quick glance back to see it. If you're going southbound, I think you're coming under the underpass. I don't see it as a significant impact. All they're going to see is blue, and I would think it's very unlikely that that visual impact would be different between metal and CMU. So from my position as a planning commissioner, I'm indifferent on building material. I would like it to match the rest of the building, and the blue color seems to do that. But as far as material, I don't know that I would agree with staff's recommendation on the CMU. I think I'm indifferent between the two materials.
You persuaded me.
Yeah, that's a good picture.
Any other questions for the applicant? No.
I'm sorry, you know, I am passionate. You guys have seen me before. I'm an old guy, I'm passionate about my business, I love it. People say, are you ever gonna retire? No. My son's gonna try to get me out of there, I'm sure, when I'm 75, bothering him the crap out of him, you know, but I'll be hanging around for a long time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell.
Thank you.
This matter, is this scheduled for public hearing?
Yes, public hearing.
Yes, this matter's been scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll take the opportunity to open the public hearing and invite any member of the public who wishes to step forward and speak to this matter. Seeing no one step forward, we'll close the public hearing. Any further questions for staff?
Yes. Corey, in this particular case, I honestly feel a little bit weird even talking about this or recommending this, but why is a waiver of strict compliance for the landscaping requirements, has that been considered for this?
No, they've not applied for that. I would
that-
have to read the buffer area to see if that's available for waiver of strict compliance.
So, okay, and then let's back up for a second then. So the green space that we're talking about there, is that for a buffer, or is that to bring us up to compliance with landscaping requirements?
That's for the buffer.
So that's not our landscaping requirement?
Well, you
It's in the landscaping section.
You need some of it to meet the requirement as well, so it's kind of both, the way I read it at least. Because right now, I think he's at 20%, and code he needs 15%, but the buffer's 30 feet. So if you got rid of enough to fit parking stalls in there, he'd probably be underneath the landscape requirement.
Okay, but so here's the thing though, is that the waiver of strict compliance, which I have, well, I think this has come up twice. Once cottage on the corner, and once at the assisted living center over there. It didn't make sense over there. I was opposed to the waiver on the cottage in the corner because it was a brand new development. You can do whatever you want, brand new development. But in this case, there's three requirements you got to look at, right? It preserves the intent of the chapter and provision for which the waiver is authorized. So kind of the intent there is, especially in my mind, along the frontage road, is to make it look nice and appealing and attractive and whatever else, and we can talk about that as well. Granting of a waiver will not result in an adverse impact on surrounding properties. So, there's a really beautiful wall apparently along there, so I don't know how anybody's gonna see that there's landscaping there or not. And then 3 is A or B. The strict application of the provision in question is unreasonable or unnecessary for the specific use, design, or site proposal, given the nature of the proposal, or the property has extraordinary or exceptional physical conditions that do not generally exist on nearby property, blah, 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 blah. I'll be honest with you, in my mind, that if we can get around the buffering type of an issue, a waiver for the compliance here might make sense because, you know, for one thing, Mr. Bell makes a point that if you put a bunch of landscaping back in a gated off, closed off impound yard, that's kind of unreasonable or unnecessary, and I don't think it's going to impact the surrounding property in this case. So, I don't know, any other thoughts or comments on that, Corey?
No, if it can qualify to look at it, I'd be cautious to look at the buffer language and just re-review it, because buffers are a real important component of the landscaping, and I don't know if it's eligible. That's all I need to check.
Is it
Is it
procedurally, because one of the elements is whether there's going to be an adverse effect on property, and since this hasn't been noticed as a waiver of strict compliance, obviously people that are nearby wouldn't know that we were considering that today. Is that something that we would need to table, have them bring it back to us so that we could publicly notice it? Or I'm looking to Lisa on this one.
The applicant would actually have to apply for that.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's
all
not
right.
necessarily on the table today, but.
So is there a fee associated with that application, or is that just write a letter and say, I want that?
We did try to add a number of fees. I can certainly look that up. Yeah, I think there could be a fee associated with that as well.
So I agree with you. A 30-foot buffer right there doesn't, I mean, it's in the code for a reason, but you know, even if you reduce it to fit a car, reduce it from 30 feet to 10 feet, and then you've just added 15 or 20 more parking stalls, which is my concern. Building alignment, the 8-foot, that's not my call. I don't have any issues with it. It'll go to the Board of Adjustments, but I'm okay with that. It's the parking. I don't want 80 stalls. Don't think that's what I'm shooting for, but at least 10 to 15 more would be nice, just a peace of mind. And if it's possible to reduce that buffer, I would look into it and do parking. So
I totally agree with your train of thought here. I would like, who would like a few more parking stalls? And 30 foot of landscape inside of an 8 foot of an impound yard. Sorry.
So I agree. I mean, I like the way that we're thinking, because I think that we're all looking at that plan and putting up a bunch of landscaping in an area that no one is ever going to see just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I think that's why we're up here struggling, trying to figure out how to make this work within our existing codes, because we are bound by the city codes. But if there's a way that we can make this work and be compliant with our city codes, I'd like to find a way to do it. Because I mean, yes, maybe part of the trees are for buffer, but I think a lot of these are to improve the property and make it look nice to I-15, and nobody's going to see it.
Yeah.
No one's going to see it.
No, I think the buffer is to separate from the residential zone, but that wall there and I don't know.
And I am concerned about the parking. I don't think I don't think that we need 80 stalls. Nowhere close to 80 stalls. But maybe it's just once bitten, twice shy. I've seen it where the building has changed hands down the road and nobody's thinking about it now, but later it becomes an issue. And so I tend to be with Corey on this one, that I want to err on the side of getting in a few more parking spots than less. I don't want to overpopulate it. It doesn't need to be Home Depot for all the reasons that you mentioned. But I want to just be a little conservative, not a lot, a little conservative on the parking.
Corey, is it a feasible path forward that we, if the commission is so inclined to approve the conceptual plan tonight, and in between that and final, he come with a waiver of strict compliance to come at final, or is the waiver required at conceptual?
You can waive it at final, we just got to find the right process to it. But you see, reading some of it, I think staff needs to weigh on that analysis, because you got All Seasons that installed their buffer. And you have to look at adjacent properties.
Great.
There is a $125 fee for landscape waiver application.
But I think it's something that we can look at.
Okay.
definitely.
So-
Raise the question to look at.
So Corey, is the more prudent thing to do then is to table this entire thing until they can revisit the waiver and bring it all in with the conceptual plan with the waiver?
Or to move forward
The
piecemeal,
waiver
do it
doesn't
now and-
stipulate when it's issued, they can just request it. So the conceptuals are for feedback, for you to have a chance to, if they want to go make that argument, to come back and make that argument.
So if we were to approve the conceptual, give the applicant time to consider that waiver, and then at final, that may or may not reflect the waiver, depending on.
Correct.
What they choose.
If that
So
seems
that
to
would
work.
be an additional directive that you would say is buffer or seek
Okay.
a waiver, and then let the waiver run its course.
And sorry, just to be clear, Lisa, we're good on notice in between conceptual and final and the waiver
'Cause we'll
as an intervening matter.
Well, they'll have to apply. That's how we start any process. They apply, they pay their fee. There's basically a 21-day process for any application, so that may delay their final site plan if that's what they want to apply for. And I would just recommend that if you're going to add something on this, that it just be permissive. We're not saying the applicant needs to apply for a waiver, but
Yeah.
Yes.
you know, I want to be careful about that, as well as allow staff to weigh in on that to see if it's a viable option.
Well, that's why I think we do it the way that Corey mentioned, which was either have the buffer or apply for the waiver of strict compliance.
Very similar to what we're doing on the parking modification. The only thing is that we do have the application and the information, but we're still tabling, staff's recommending tabling action on that. So perhaps before final, well, you know, they could address that.
Lisa, who makes that determination? Is it, if I apply for that waiver, is it you all?
Yeah.
Any further discussion on this one? I think I'm inclined to go ahead and make the motion as approved by staff, including tabling the parking modification, and then the applicant can decide whether they want to come in with an application for a waiver of strict compliance.
So do we need to add,
No, I don't think we need to add anything, right? Because it's up to them whether they want to decide to come and apply for the modification waiver or not. I
Well-
suspect they will, but.
well, Corey mentioned, she suggested a directive to do that, but I guess if they don't come back with the application for waiver, then they got to do the
That's
buffer.
up to them.
That's fine.
Right,
So
that's
we
up
don't
to
need
them.
that's
But I
right.
don't think we need to address that in our motion, to address Lisa's
But I
comment.
think that's something to
we're not
consider
telling them.
before the final site plan is to
Yeah.
see if that waiver will work.
So unless there's any further discussion or debate, I'm going to make a motion for the planning commission to accept the conceptual site plan for the proposed changes to the site of the Dave's Complete Auto located at 335 South Frontage Road with directives 1 through 4 in the staff report, or excuse me, 1 through 3 in the staff report. And then 4 would be the request for the parking modification. I propose that it be tabled for further review and approval in conjunction with the final site plan submitted to determine the site's actual capacity to provide necessary off-street parking stalls, and for suggested reasons A through C in the staff report.
Second.
Who wants to claim that one?
I will.
Logan. Katie, I'll let you figure out who did that one. I think they'll flip a coin. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? Commissioner Johnson, we'll start with you.
Yeah, aye.
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 Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to check with Corey after this meeting. Give him a call tomorrow, and you guys can talk about if you want to pursue a.
Oh, I will. It's $125, that's what 3 sprinkler heads? For sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up on the agenda, number 3, we're looking at general plan amendments to our moderate income housing. And I'll turn the time over to staff.
Is that where we're at?
Number 3, right? Number 3?
A quick comment, I think, do we have an applicant here for one more item? Would it be prudent
Do we?
to swap a couple items real quick?
Yeah.
What do we have here? Is it the tabled item? Is that the one that's?
Yeah.
That's
I'd
up?
swap them.
I'm perfectly fine swapping it. Okay, so let's table item number 3 for now. We'll move on to number 4, which was previously tabled. This is the Parish Creek PDO rezone with conceptual site plan amendment at 1050 North, 950 West. Did I throw you by switching there, Corey?
Well, I think we intended the other way, but when we put it on the agenda, it ended up switched.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, thank you for making that suggestion. And I will turn time over to staff.
Okay. So you've had a lengthy night, and the applicant's been here for a while, so I assume that he's anxious to. I won't belabor too many points to you. You can ask the questions. Two matters that are associated with it. This is the Parish Creek PDO. It sits in our industrial high zone. The end road going from Hogan's, the road where Hogan Construction's on, and enters and terminates at the Legacy Parkway. It was granted a PDO at the request of the original development based on that the cul-de-sac length exceeds our ordinances. And so the discussion is how can you develop this property in a manner that makes it viable because it has a very deep and lengthy use area. So the applicants originally submitted for the PDO. It extended that cul-de-sac beyond the 400-foot length quite a bit. In exchange for that, they have a larger right-of-way. So you can actually run lanes of traffic down each side. If there was a shut-off on one side for emergency vehicles, the other side could open up to two-way traffic. So the boulevard design in the center separates those lanes and allows an opportunity for traffic to flow out if one of them gets shut down. And that was in exchange for the extra length of the cul-de-sac. The second part that was reviewed is part of the PDO, which is an extra. There's a couple of acres of wetlands associated, so you have this kind of south half and north half divided by this wetlands area. And the proposal was to integrate some pathways through the development as part of the wetlands feature. So you have you have a sidewalk or pathway that's connecting the road to 1250 West. It was a bridge over this drainage canal. And that was one element to be provided. The other element that they're looking at is the sidewalk system around the cul-de-sac that's crosses over the wetlands. And they'd like to alter that. A long time ago, there was a discussion on the pathway to 1250 West. There was willingness, the city manager at the time, to look at eliminating that. And part of the reasoning, and staff was conceptually supportive of it, is we have to cross over the drainage canal onto the Logan, Thank you. Misrepresenting your name, the Hogan site to get to 1250 West because the Jersey barriers in the incline of the 1250 bridge going over the top would be in the way. It's not really practical and feasible because it encumbers the Hogan's lot. And if you look at the pictures and walk the area, the likelihood of that happening is possible, but difficult. So the city manager said, look, why don't we maybe use some increment from the site because it's part of our community development area, and use increment generated from your site for 1250 West, because the idea was Legacy Commons was coming in and we wanted a north path from Parish Lane to the Legacy Parkway, and it's likely the bridge has it on the west side, so the likelihood of that pathway is on the west side of 1250. So he was saying, hey, we need to go to the RDA and take a look at that, see if we can use increment for that future sidewalk to help raise the bid level to our alternative modes or alternative transportation grants that we look at as part of that. So that was preliminarily agreed to by everybody, but they've gone and pursued their development, and that's gone by the wayside for the time being. But they're coming back closer and closer to want to take advantage of that. It was offered that it wouldn't cost the applicant to go through that process. But in the meantime, they've looked at the sidewalk system that's, they've bridged over the wetlands with the bulb of the cul-de-sac, and there were sidewalks, and there's a basically what you see on the Legacy Parkway, there's a timber bridge bridging across, and the plat originally indicated that those type of public improvements would be managed by the property owner, even though they're publicly accessible for walkways. There's been some discussions that I've heard a little bit from the city engineer and the applicant, and I don't know the details of the discussion, but there was concerns about maintenance, the growth of the Phragmites going up through the boardwalk, and whether that was really a practical situation. And then obviously creating the footings and bridge work that's on each side of the wetlands, because you probably can't do much in the wetlands, maybe a post or something like that for support. And so the idea is, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing these sidewalks. And so they came in with both kind of proposals, one from the city manager discussion from the historic past, one from the city engineer about the feasibility of those boardwalks and the maintenance of them, and have applied for a change to the PDO on those two matters. And so I reviewed it, and although I was part of the bridge to 1250 West discussion, I was not integrated with the sidewalk discussion, and so my recommendation doesn't go as far as maybe those past discussions. And here's why. This is amending the PDO and the master plan, so they're combined together in this case, and it goes through the rezone process. So it's not just an administrative review, it's a legislative action to change the PDO. So it has to come to this body recommends, goes to the city council, they make the decision. I understand the design elements and the problems here. I'm fundamentally stepping back and saying, look, there's a PDO. What was the basis of the PDO? It was to get the extra cul-de-sac in exchange for the road design and the pathway design. Those are the fundamentals of the PDO. We're eliminating the fundamentals of the pathway from the PDO. Rather than just step out and say, support it, I'm taking a little bit larger picture look to the development. I've been out there with the public works director, in this case not the city engineer, the public works director, and I'm concerned that just limiting the pathways because of practicality and moving forward is not the right way to look at this legislative decision. I think the development would be better served to continue the idea that we wanted to improve something with inside the development from a design. If not the pathways, what would that be? So my preliminary report is identifying we have drainage from the sites going into the 2 acres of wetlands. They're being choked off by the biomass. So we're going to have future drainage problems associated with this project because it's using the Bernard Creek channel for some of the drainage. The building that's to the south, parking lot and everything on the north side drains into those wetlands. The piping going under the cul-de-sac goes into the south wetlands. The biomass is terrible there, and particularly the Phragmites associated with there. So if we're talking about increment financing in replacement for the bridge to the 1250 West, I think we should have a discussion with the city's RDA to use increment financing, that if we're going to consider changing the pathway system, what can we do internally in a partnership with the developer to improve those wetlands? And it's going to involve the Army Corps and the quality of those wetlands. But it's, you know, you have water, Phragmites are grown when you have unstable area of water. And it comes and goes. The Phragmites are successful in that. Burning them off, we know the headaches associated with that. So I don't know what the cost would be. I don't know what the Army Corps would be willing to do. I don't know how it affects the drainage. But I'd rather have the engineer, instead of just saying, yeah, the sidewalks are a mess, let's have the engineer go back, we'll have the developer go back, let's talk about what the feasibility of improving the wetlands would be. Maybe have some preliminary discussions with the Army Corps so we get an idea if there's a ballpark opportunity. If there is, let's go to the RDA and let's ask to, not only for the increment for the trail, or maybe, in my mind, the trail is too far out into the future. That's part of my thinking. I think because we've bid on it and we've got turned down, the city's not building it, and so maybe we're a little premature. Maybe it's going to take 7-8 years to get that pathway through. Would we better serve to just take increment now and improve the wetlands and use the grant period on 1250 West and some other funding to put into the trail? And I think, from my perspective, I hope it's a positive that increment used inside the development to improve the development is a better bang for the money and matches the PDO than simply eliminating it. So there's my soapbox, as quick as I could give it to you.
Corey, question for you with regard to your recommendation. In option 1, you have 5 directives listed, and you have an or after 4. Are you suggesting that we pick one of these, or are you saying 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 5?
I gotta look at my report because I haven't seen it since the last meeting.
Intended to read?
Let me go, where is our report? Because I know it's being suggestive in it. Maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. So the Directive 1, this is the issue that I'm uncomfortable with, is street painting a sidewalk into the development. Maybe that works as a solution for the wetlands, but there also may be that maybe the pathway system needs to be capped and we're not trying to go deeper. And so maybe the sidewalk system serves to a certain point and we need to not necessarily paint the sidewalks onto the road, encouraging people onto the road. So I wanted that discussion, clarification with the city engineer. So that's something that says, hey, if we're heading down that road, is painting, their proposed painting, is that the right way to approach this? Directive 2, this is the issue of the bridge. I'm not sure the RDA is ready to fund that bridge, or not the bridge, fund the sidewalk and agree to that terms. So I'd rather to see a little bit more discussion that what is the RDA willing to participate in? Because if they're not willing to participate, or the money's being diverted to other drainage issues or whatever that CDA money's being used for, and they don't want it to be eligible for the trail, I'd hate to just eliminate it. And it's back to that inside the development. What should we do in exchange? Directive 3, I think that's the one I was talking about. Directive 4, response to city engineer and the time frame. Again, I'm doubting right now from what I've known that we've applied to and the projects that we were turned down for. I'm questioning whether 1250 West is where we should place our focus. So then I'm saying, or
Okay.
in lieu of all of this, let's go to 5.
In lieu of 1 through 4, go to 5?
Yep.
Okay.
Head to 5. But the applicant hasn't had a discussion with direct zoning staff, so I don't know how much trouble we are in or not in, so we're hoping this meeting flushes that out.
All right. I appreciate that clarification. I wanted to make sure I was reading your report right, and I wasn't, so thank you for the clarification. Any other questions for staff? Nope. If not, we'll invite the applicant to step forward and speak to this matter. We appreciate your patience. We know we've had a lot on the agenda tonight. If you could just state your name for us.
My name is Ken Stewart. I represent the ownership group, Remonite Properties. So when we developed this, the aggregate area up here where there was going to be the pathway going up to 1250, we had fairly lengthy conversations with the then city manager. I don't know if he's gone yet or not, but
Yeah.
Steve.
I provided the email to
Yeah,
them.
about using some of the development money, incremental money, I suppose is what you called it, to develop that. And we reached a conclusion. I think there's an email from Steve that's been circulated on that says, listen, we can't use the funds for that, so let's just scrap it. And I think part of that conversation was that we actually went to Hogan, and in the upper corner there, where's that little stick?
It's right up here in the front.
Oh, okay.
This stick has never gotten
This
so much
area
use.
right here, the only way to make that connection was to go through Hogan's property right there. We actually went and met with them, and they're not willing to grant that access through their property because they've got their property secured with the fence and other things along there, and it would really cause problems for them to have a boardwalk go down there and then a bridge go over. And then, I think to your point, is once you get there, then where? Then where do you go, So I think that portion of it was scrapped, and that was what the understanding that we had is that, we wouldn't apply for the funds. Kind of a compromise, we would eliminate the need for that boardwalk and bridge over that area. Now this area we were planning on doing and have no problem doing it. but I think Kevin had concerns about the actual structural integrity of that and making it work. And it's chiefly due to the fact that you've got Bernard Creek that runs right through the middle of this right here. And which is part of the designated wetlands that we had to work around. There's really not a way, and maybe there is a way, to shore that up and not violate the Army Corps of Engineers and their requirements for working in a designated wetland. So that was why the painted thing and the whole process there. I'm not real happy about the painted thing either. I think that's kind of a Mickey Mouse solution, personally. But we're willing to work with the city in any capacity to make that work. We have no problem doing that. I think, as you can see from the freeway, we've done a good job on the design of that building. It looks good. It adds to the appeal. We've got the 8th largest automobile maker in the world as one of the tenants there, and others to follow. So, I mean, it's a great development, and we plan on embellishing the whole thing and making it a really nice area for Centerville. But we want to do what makes sense. I don't think this makes sense. I'll just be blunt. I think that's just a big waste of money for everybody. And I think we just need to kind of sit down with Kevin and Corey and others and kind of come up with a reasonable solution. And that's what I would recommend we do there on that. But this aggregate area, I think you're just wasting your money for now. When the area develops out, you can figure out how to get across 1250 and make a walking trail system work in that area. We have no problem working with you and working through the canal or the wetlands with the Army Corps of Engineers and coming up with a solution. We're all for that. We wanted to landscape all that with grass, but I think there were some objections there we had from, I don't know who, but they wanted to add wildflowers and other things in that area, which we don't think look as good. But anyway, we understand that it's wetlands, and we have to work with the, the federal government in that regard to make sure that we're good there. So my recommendation on, or what I'd like to see as part of the ownership group, is table that for now. Just get that off the table and not deal with it in any way, in any capacity. And then get together with the engineer and Corey and his staff and find a reasonable solution for that.
So it sounds like to me, let me just make sure, because staff has recommended, I think essentially what you're saying in Directive 5, and you're fine with that. Let's table it, let's talk, let's come back and
but what
see
we
what else we
don't
can
want it
do.
to do is hold up the occupancy or the bond release of this, and we're basically finished all the improvements. And so it doesn't impact us opening up, because we've got commitments with Fiat Chrysler on getting that building occupied and working now. So if the city is fine with that, we are absolutely on board. We want to make it a high quality, top-notch facility. So we're all on board with that. And we want to, quite frankly, utilize the wetlands to the advantage of the park and embellish them in any way that we can. Because we own 90 acres up in Farmington, we got the same issue there. And the Army Corps of Engineers, we have been fighting with them to try and get us to tear out all that nasty phragmite and replace it with buffalo grass and nice boulders and make it look really nice. And it's like, no. And we just are scratching our heads. I mean.
Okay, I'm sorry. You guys have both said phragmite. What is that?
It's like a reed.
It's that tall, obnoxious weed that is not indigenous to this area.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It looks, the big cattails that go about 14 feet tall.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Okay. Here's my.
I Googled it too.
Did you? Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Great.
Anyway, that's the commentary that I had. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Yeah, one of the things we're hoping, from my perspective, is that we can talk with Randy. Randy talked about how the water is distributed in the storm drain system in Bernard Creek, and there may be some available water. So I think if we can have some incentives on our side for the Army Corps to come up with something. I mean, you can bridge those wetlands, but you're going to be spending a pretty penny.
Yeah. Okay.
For bridges. So I'm thinking, well, rather than force the sidewalk issue, maybe we can take increment and couple it with the developer and come up with a plan that we can convince the Army Corps of.
sounds like we have a developer who's willing to think outside the box and work with us on coming up with something better. Or alternative, I should say. Something different. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, wait, this has been scheduled for a public hearing, so I'll take the opportunity to open the public hearing and invite any member of the public who wishes to step forward. Seeing no one here, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions for staff? Follow-up questions for staff? Is this, if we do this, if we table it with the direction, directive number 5, is that going to impact their bonding or anything? That's going to continue to go forward?
I don't think so, Kev, because the subdivision improvements with the sidewalk are associated with the subdivision and its warranty. The sidewalk's installed all the way to the end of the lot, the property line already. And so if they comply with that lot, it shouldn't hold them up for the CO.
Fantastic. Any other questions for staff?
No, just a comment, well, maybe it's better when we have a motion on the table. Right?
Yeah, okay, discussion, debate.
Yeah, I think the trade-off of getting rid of the path and adding that circle is if we feel like we need to get something out of this to grant the PDO originally, that's a worthless little circle in my opinion. Even if it was constructed out of better materials, I just don't see the benefit to it. And if we feel as though we need to have kind of that public benefit as part of the PDO, which was the intent of the path, storm drain or something seems like a much better fit.
I agree. Chair will entertain a motion. Well, actually, wait, I'll recommend that we table the action regarding the proposed pedestrian pathway amendments as submitted by the applicant and direct the applicant to consider the matters as set forth in directive number 5 in the staff report, which, well, in lieu of providing the expected pathways, have a discussion with the city's RDA and city engineer, consider the possibility of a wetlands enhancement plan within the development, and discuss with the city's RDA the feasibility of tax increments assistance funding coupled with the costs associated with the eliminated pathways to implement the plan.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? If not, I'll start with you, Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
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 Hi.
Aye.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad. I think that's a good solution there, Corey. Way to think outside the box.
It's a good potential solution.
It's a good potential solution.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
I think we might get something out of that.
Can I
Okay.
address the applicant, Madam
Oh,
Chair?
yes, please.
I'll report to Brant, the city manager, about this outcome, and then we'll get in contact with you.
Yeah, I'm going to take a...
Okay.
Okay, and we've been going for, well over 2 hours now, so I am going to take a brief recess, just for 5 minutes or less, and then we'll go back on the record. So we'll be adjourned.